I rise today, Mr. Speaker, to be this child's voice and the voice of all of those who live in the wealthiest nation on earth, but still live in hunger. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the list of the most food insecure districts in the country, you see populations of every race and every ethnicity. Even in the state with the least food insecurity, 15% of families still struggle to find their next meal. So while I speak today as a member of the esteemed Congressional Black Caucus, we stand with all Americans. Sadly, my congressional district in the great Hoosier state of Indiana holds the dubious distinction of having one of the highest rates of food insecurity in the entire country. Over 30% of the families in Indianapolis struggle to put food on the table and don't always know where their next meal is coming from. To be clear, this is not a criticism of the local food banks or not-for-profits that serve the poor very honorably. Hoosiers take care of one another, which is why we have some of the best service organizations in the entire country.
I know.
But sadly, even the best food banks can't pull food out of the thin air. Over the past few years, Mr. Speaker, I've heard from many Indiana food banks that donations are down as more people struggle to make ends meet in our economic downturn. And with high unemployment and underemployment, federal assistance simply isn't buying enough food to meet their demand. The shelves just aren't as full as they used to be. This leaves many low-income constituents to rely on SNAP, also known as food stamps, a program that will be cut by $5 billion next year as Recovery Act provisions expire. Even with ideal funding levels, food stamps never means large, multi-course meals for poor families. The average person receives less than $1.50 per meal. For many of these families, Mr. Speaker, a healthful meal is already a luxury that remains out of reach. These families just want to put food on the table. The program means a few $100s a month per family, which is enough for some bread, cereal, and canned food, but rarely fresh vegetables or meat. No one gets rich off of food stamps, but at least they can eat. Yet, for some reason, the program remains one of the prime targets of members of Congress who are now fighting to cut nearly 4 million people from this program. This is unacceptable and it has real-life implications. Fortunately, in our district, 7th Congressional District of Indiana, we have the Indy Hunger Network, Butler University Center for Urban Ecology, the Indiana Healthy Weight Initiative, Indiana's Family and Social Services Administration, FSSA, and the Indy Food Council. They're working with our local farmers markets to encourage people receiving assistance to reinvest in our local community and economy by matching the SNAP dollars spent on fresh fruits and vegetables. These types of partnerships are not supported when we decide to cut benefits and eligibility. We must invest in these types of creative initiatives, programs that feed our community and incentivize healthy living, programs that create jobs and rebuild our economy so that people are fed and healthy enough to go to school, work, and contribute to our economy. Now, some of my colleagues argue that our debt is out of control, that we need to rein in spending, and that every American should be asked to sacrifice equally. But we have to put this thing into perspective. If you're a person who makes millions of dollars every year, you might lose hundreds, thousands of dollars, maybe. If you own a business, you might decide to invest a little less. By contrast, if you make a minimum wage and live under the poverty line year after year, what might you lose? Monetarily, very little, $50 here, $100 there. Small impact on our debt. But that small amount, that few dollars here and there, equates to food on the table. When looking for so-called equitable treatment, no one is ever asking a wealthy person to go hungry. But that is exactly what some of my Republican colleagues are doing with their proposal to cut $39 billion to SNAP. They are suggesting that some Americans, like those in poor neighborhoods in Indianapolis, simply don't deserve to eat because it's too expensive. Other Republicans argue that SNAP is only meant as a temporary stopgap. But for most people, Mr. Speaker, poverty isn't a temporary stop on the way to prosperity. It's a family. If a family is fortunate enough to pull itself out of poverty, it could take many years, maybe even a decade. Unfortunately, our recession pushed many families in the wrong direction, costing jobs, incomes, and homes, also moving people deeper into poverty. This means more children who go to school on an empty stomach. It means more aging seniors already on a fixed income who are forced to choose between buying groceries and medication. It means more poverty, not less. In fact, between 2007 and 2012, during the height of the Great Recession, the number of food stamp users rose 77% because more people needed them. I'm standing here with my brilliant and esteemed colleagues, Representative Horsford and Representative Jeffries, and the Congressional Black Caucus, because our districts are some of the hardest hit. But this isn't a black issue, Mr. Speaker. This is a nationwide problem that impacts every color and ethnicity in every city, county, and town. And yet, some of our colleagues in this House were willing to ignore millions of their constituents who are struggling to eat just to pass a bill that cuts SNAP by $37 billion. We should be increasing SNAP funding, not decreasing it. We should learn the lessons of European austerity measures. We should be debating an extension of expiring provisions to avoid benefit reductions next year. We should be focused on ending hunger in America, not just by cutting a program that might reduce the debt. Mr. Speaker, as I close, many of us take for granted we can grab a sandwich or make a salad when we need to eat. Most people here, most of us, I know I will, celebrate Thanksgiving next week with tables full of good food, and some of the best food that money can buy. But for many in America, Thanksgiving is just another day spent in hunger. For these people, a traditional Thanksgiving meal is simply out of reach. Yet we believe that struggling families across the country would say that on Thanksgiving they are thankful for any amount of food they can buy, the food that SNAP helps them buy. Instead of taking this away, let's fight for a higher quality of life, and let's stand together to make sure our neighbors, our children, and our vulnerable seniors never go hungry. Thank you. I yield back my time.
I'd like to thank the distinguished gentleman from Indiana for his remarks and for highlighting the fact that this is an issue that affects all Americans, families across this country, and that we all know someone who relies on SNAP benefits or has come into contact with individuals, our neighbors, our friends, our veterans who rely on these benefits as well. And so